This is House Planning Help, episode 291. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guest is Werner Brouwer from the municipality of Almere. You might have heard of Almere before because we've certainly mentioned it in podcasts. It's actually been something that I've wanted to do for a while, a podcast on it. But I'll tell you how this came about in a minute. Anyway, the focus of this one is all about freedoms. The freedom to be able to build whatever you want. Perhaps you don't have it where you are now, or maybe you need to head here. So I must thank Joe and Laura for the tip-off here. I think they might have moved from Amsterdam now, but they were living there at the time they first got in touch, and they planned to build their house in this area, Oosterwold, that I was just mentioning in Almere. It's a sort of subsection of Almere. And they said, this is right up your street, Ben. And so initially I got on the case, I tried to make it happen. And then, like many things, it goes onto our master planner of a million different ideas and probably somehow got forgotten about. So Joe, very good. He got back in touch and said, Ben, what happened to that? Right, okay, I'm back on it. And so we've made it happen. And Werner has kindly come to answer some of my questions. So shall we get going then? I started by asking him to tell me a little bit about his background.
Okay, I'm 58 years old, and one of the things that I like very much in Oosterwold, I lived for 20 years in a community where I also built my own home, and we also constructed the road and the sewerage, etc. I work at an engineering firm, so it's not quite difficult for me because I have the knowledge for it. But I worked about 40 years in development like the traditional ones, where we decided how the roads would be designed and what kind of houses people should live in. But for myself, I always built my own houses. So this was a great opportunity 2 years ago when they asked me if I wanted to come to work there.
Wow. Well, I know in the UK, the developments that you've got, Almere, always gets, why can't we copy this? That's what they're always saying. So can you explain a bit, first of all, about the wider development that's going on?
In Almere and Oosterwold, development is made by people themselves. So there is not a designer or an urban planning office. And people are very free to choose whatever they want. We don't have much of regulations, small ones. But the other side is that people have to decide on everything themselves. So everything, when you buy a lot to build your own house, if you decide to do so, well, the road is already constructed, or at least you have a drawing where you can see where the road will be constructed. But here you have to go, to talk with your future neighbors. Well, in what way shall we make it, and what will be the cost, and how do we divide the cost? So the very special thing is you can choose anything you want, but the difficulty is you have to choose. There is no option that you can, lay back and think, that's very difficult for me. Maybe another should do that. Or maybe I will call to the municipality and ask them, please explain to me what I have to do. No, you have to decide for yourself, and you have to find out for yourself.
Does that mean then that you often get people who have done things like this before because they have more of an idea of what they want?
No, I think for most people, it's the very first time.
Oh.
So they're going in a large project for them for the first time, and they have to find out. And it takes a lot of more time than they expected. And after it, when they finish it, everyone says, it took a lot more time. It was more difficult than I thought. But the difficulty is not building the house, because there is not a lot of information. You can call to a contractor and he will build your house. But the difficulty is the decisions you have to make, but especially you have to make them in cooperation with future neighbors. And that's not the easy part, because everyone has a different budget. They have different ideas, and still you have to come to one end.
Do you know who your neighbours are in a given area? So is that how it starts, with a meeting?
Yes. Maybe the best way to describe it is when you have the first initiative. Well, he starts, and the next one, they also have to follow in a row. So the first thing you do is when you think, that's a nice part, I want to live there, you have to contact the one who was there before you. For example, if one always dreamed of a circular plot, that's no problem, but he has to find someone else who wants a concave plot, because we don't. And that's the difficulty, because people, they choose things, that are not common, but, you have to fit in with other people.
And does this always lead to diversity, or do you actually find sometimes people, they've got the freedom, but they just build something simple? I don't know whether that makes sense.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense, because I told you I live in a community developed just the same way. And 20 years ago, there was a lot of freedom for us. And I think 80% is all traditional. Yeah. But I think in Oosterwold there is, it's something else. You also have very traditional houses, but that also contributes to the diversity. But people are also making a lot of different choices. We have houses built of car tires, used car tires, straw, wood, steel, shipping containers, and all next to each other. So if you are very traditional oriented and you want to be sure that your neighbor will build something, you also like, then you have to go somewhere else, because you don't know. If your neighbor decides he wants to live in a lighthouse, he can do it.
So does the neighbour who wants to live in the lighthouse have to wait for the right moment almost? You were mentioning about the neighbours that he's got to size it up. So if he comes along with his lighthouse idea and the neighbours aren't too keen, is there still an opportunity, or do you find a place where he can go in?
No, he can go wherever he wants. People take the initiative and they call us or they write us, and then who comes first has to choose first. But we don't make a decision of what kind of initiative comes where, except for one. If someone will start a firm or a company, then we will look at, how much traffic it will attract, because that can make a difference and it cannot be done everywhere. But for the other example, the lighthouse, if it is his turn to choose, he can go wherever he wants.
Now, just thinking about sustainability, what can and do people find themselves doing together? Not necessarily on their own, but how does it become a more sustainable organic community?
Yes. When you talk about sustainability in terms of energy consumption or electricity, then people do it individually, because there are not so many examples of people who want to do it together. But we have also, in terms of circularity, for example, people have to make their own wastewater treatment, sewerage. And that means that wastewater, when they come from the toilets or the showers, they have to clean it again, and it will stay in the area. So we don't transport it by a sewerage pipe to a large system elsewhere. It's all small systems in the area. And there is an obligation to contribute to city farming for 50% of the plot you have. So when you have a plot of 1,000 square meters, then 500 meters must be used for farming. And it can be done with sheep but also with fruits or something else. We have a vineyard as an example. The only thing you cannot do, people ask them for the agricultural part, can we keep horses in it? And the answer is that it has to contribute to food production. So unless you will eat the horse, it's not an option.
So why are those factors important? Why is the autonomy of looking after your own water and also your own food? Why that?
Well, I think the main reason is, there's a difference between food production and wastewater, but the main reason is it contributes to the conscience of your behavior. I don't think the food production will solve the world food problem, but it makes you aware of the distance food has to travel before you can eat it. It's a silly thing that most food will travel 10,000s of miles through the world before we eat it. In history, the part where we built Oosterwold was an agricultural land, so we want to keep tradition or this awareness we want to keep alive.
And when did it actually start on site, those first few houses?
It started, the first buildings were made, I think, about 5 years ago. And at this moment, there are 1,500 inhabitants, more or less.
And have there been any lessons that you've learnt through the early stages and then to where we are 5 years down the line?
Yes, there are lessons learned. I think there are lessons learned for initiatives, but also for the government. For government, it's very difficult to let it go. We always think that we know best and that we have a drawing board and there we decide where other people are going to live and the way they will do it. So what we have to learn that is to make a difference between what is really necessary and the other things, well, just see what happens. And that's difficult. And lessons learned for the initiatives are people must be very aware what they start, the time it will take. And sometimes you have to make the conclusion that one of the earlier goals were very difficult. For example, I mentioned sewerage and wastewater treatment. Well, lessons learned are it's a very technical solution. And at this moment, we are preparing for another way where the government takes a part back of the responsibility.
Right. So how are people dealing with water on their sites? Is it in lots of different ways? Can you describe some of those?
Well, I mentioned the circularity of water, and because they also have the obligation for agriculture, they also need water for it. And at this moment, with climate change, it's not only very heavy rain, but also a lack of water in sometimes. So where do we let the water and in what way can we keep it in the area? People are very aware of the use of water. I think that the water consumption is far lower than average in Holland in this area, because people are going to live here, and when they have to treat it themselves, well, it also creates an awareness. You don't think when you have a sewerage pipe at your house and you flush the toilet, well, it's not a question. And for people in Oosterwold, when they started to build, they have to ask themselves, how many times do I flush the toilet and how big will my wastewater treatment be in the future? So it's quite technical questions, but also questions about in what way do I want to live? And people are very aware when they come to Oosterwold.
And when they're storing that water, is that part of the decision-making process? How much do I store? And is it easy to get that calculation wrong?
Well, for the storing of water, we have regulations about the percentage of the area you have to use for water storage. Because I think that as a government, we don't have to prescribe what they have to do, but I think it's important that we give the information so they can make a well-made decision. So we give the information, but the way they will do it, they have to decide themselves. But in our information, they know where they can find it, what different type of solutions are, and then they can go on.
And in the UK, we seem to have a sort of very slow governmental system. And I mentioned earlier how we're always shining a light on what you're doing. How is it you have got like this as a government to be so proactive and to try things and realise that, okay, yeah, sometimes I've got wrong? What tips would you have for people in those positions?
You don't want me to make a joke about Brexit, I think.
Well, don't worry. Not all of us are in favour of it. We think, yeah, don't get me started on that.
Well, I think you can relate it to the city of Almere itself. I think that government in Holland is not more fast or proactive than in the rest of Europe. But Almere is a new built city. It's about 50 years old. It has 200,000 inhabitants. So it is used in 50 years from 0 to 200,000. Wow. It is used. It's made of very fast development. So I think it's a sort of pressure cooker in Holland. And we have a lot of space because most area was state-owned. So when you decide we want to try another way of development, then you can take a part of Holland. where you have state-owned land to sell. And that's more easy. And there is a big pressure on housing. We have a lack of housing. I think in Holland, the lack at this moment is 1 million houses to be built. And especially in the area of Amsterdam. And Almere is only 25 kilometers from Amsterdam. So it was quite easy to make it. You had the area to build it and the experience of very fast development.
So this fast development, I'm assuming it's not all self-build. Is that one of the challenges of giving people the initiative to do it themselves, is that you are slowing things down, really? Or can they keep up with developers?
In Oosterwold, developers are not allowed.
Good. Yeah, like it.
And in the recent history, it was, and we have a lot of problems with it. I don't think you have to think of Oosterwold that it will be changing the developing world. I think it's an alternative, because not everyone wants to live in a standard home. But there are also a lot of people who get very worried when they have to go building their own house. So it's an addition. But I have to be quite honest that professional developers, maybe sometimes they can do it better.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
They can do faster, but it's another group. It's another product.
What else should we know about this development then? Are there other aspects that we could bring in as well?
When you consider as a government, maybe you should give space to a development like this. One thing you have to consider is Oosterwold is very large. It's 4,300 hectares. That's all of the city of Amstelveen near Amsterdam. So if you start something new, don't make it so fast and big that you have no time to implement the lessons.
Right.
One of our main objectives is also to slow down development, because when it's new and people have to start something new and we don't know how it will turn out, and you start the same thing 1,000 at the same time, when there is a mistake in it, you have 1,000 mistakes. So you need time for this type of organic development. People need time to deal with their neighbors and to decide together how the road will be constructed. So they need time, and they cannot do it all the time. You can have a meeting with 10 people, but not with 1,000 people. Yes, you can have a meeting, but it will not give any result.
That's a very good point. Yeah, you've always got to go quite local with your community. Do you think there are any common traits in the people that embark on this and want to be part of that community?
Well, we did an investigation. In the beginning, the expectations were that people who want to go for Oosterwold, there are the very, idealists, how do you call it? A special type of people. But it's not true. The one thing they share is the idea that they have to can make their own choices. There is not someone who will make the choices for you. So that's what they share. But we have them also politically. We have them for far left wing to far right wing. It's all types, liberal, everything together and mixed. But they share the wish for freedom.
It's interesting. And has there been much interest in the community from people outside, so that they're intrigued in what's going on, or maybe that's how you end up getting your new neighbours?
A lot of people are intrigued. For example, you did call me.
That's true.
We have a lot of people also from abroad, and governments as far as China, Korea, America, articles in the National Geographic or the New York Times. I think also a lot of people, we have a lot of attention in the media. They read about it, they never heard of it, they go and watch and then are intrigued. But it's very funny, when you drive through Oosterwold, there are a lot of people working, for example, in their agricultural part or building their homes themselves. And everyone wants to tell you about his dreams and ideas. So they are quite ambassadors for their own, their own area.
It sounds like there's a lot of respect for you can have your own castle, but yet you, at the same time, you have got to somehow link in with your neighbours. So how does that work? Where is that line?
Well, it's the main part, but because you only can start building when you have a road. And for this road, you are dependent on your neighbors. So you have to come to a compromise or make a decision together. Well, that creates a bond, but sometimes it creates fights. And maybe the drawing is one thing, but then the financial part. When you have a big parcel, then a bigger part of the road will be in your garden. Well, it feels like that. But you have bought the land, and then you have to divide what will be the cost of the road and how will we share this. It's only 1% based on the number of houses, or is it on income, or is it on how many cars do you have? It's all possible.
So this infrastructure of the road, does it change a lot as it goes round the community in terms of what it's made of? Or presumably there are some, you get main roads and then you get minor roads as you get deeper into the community?
Yes. Well, we have some regulations about the width of the road because of, for example, fire cars or police cars or ambulance. So you have some regulations about the way, not the way you construct it, but the dimensions of the road. So it doesn't change much. In the beginning, they don't want to build a road because it's expensive. But in the end, when the houses are finished, we have all types, tarmac, bricks, concrete.
Yeah, so it's like the rest of the development, it changes a little bit.
Yeah.
So what does it mean for you then? You know, what will you be doing today? What's on your agenda?
I have a meeting about a different sewerage system. I told you that we have some problems with the very small ones. And then, maybe we have parts that we will try to build one bigger wastewater treatment. So that's a meeting. I have to decide on a legal procedure about people who are fighting about a road.
It's all about the road at the moment.
It's all about the roads and infrastructure. I think that will be the main issues for today.
Oh, that's quite enough. And getting interviewed all about it as well. And you've mentioned some of the key parts that a government would look after normally. So roads. Are there any other big things that we haven't talked about that you're now giving responsibility over to the community?
Yes. Normally, a large area not only consists of houses and companies, but also, for example, of schools and shops, restaurants. When they are commercial things, well, they will come in the end. When there are enough houses, there is also a supermarket. But you also have, for example, schools. Who will build a school? Because people are responsible themselves. In Holland, when people want to build a school, the government has to pay for it. But they also have to start their own initiative. And that is also for childcare or playgrounds. Who will buy the parcel for a playground? There you have to be very careful and decide in what way do you think it will be constructed. Does the government have to take the initiative? But then it will be initiative like all the other ones. And it's not that they come from the drawing board and just decide in the beginning, well, we make a school over here. Now, when it's their turn, they also have to go in the same thing, and they also have to be part of building the own road and making agriculture. So it's all equal. And that you have to decide in front and not in the end, because if you wait to the end, all logical parts, will already be taken. And the school, it attracts traffic. People will bring their child. And also for public transport, who will take care of it? In fact, in Oosterwold, the individual initiative, is a mini or micro developer. He has to do everything themselves. And for everything he will normally would ask the government, how did you did that? He will get the answer back. No, it's not question how I would do it. You wanted to do it yourself.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it, with things like that, because this comes back to time. Do you find some people are leading it more than others?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
In the community as a whole, in the beginning, everyone is very busy with their house and their road. But when they finished it, you have a lot of commitment to Oosterwold, because people are aware that they have to do it themselves. And some of them, well, they will pop up as a leader or initiative for one of these services. But it will take a little bit of time. But, well, the commitment is very big.
Well, maybe in conclusion then, how would you sum up this whole journey that you've been on, and how much further will it keep going? You know, you're talking about a lot of development. You've done 5 years. How much more is ahead?
Well, in the end, there's room for 15,000 houses.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. So you've just scratched the surface.
Yes, so I have to do 14,500.
You mentioned about having a little moment to breathe and do things perhaps differently. What will you do differently on the next 500?
We have an evaluation now at this moment. We will finalize it in October, so it's in 1 month. What went well, what went wrong, and what could be done better.
Well, it's been fascinating to hear some of the story behind it and how things have gone. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Get more in our show notes, which today you'll find at houseplanninghelp.com/291, where you can review the key points once again in our summary, or take a look at some photos of how the site has developed so far. Maybe you've got a comment or you'd like to ask a question. You can either do that at the bottom of the show notes or on social media. And of course, we'll link you to Oosterwold. That's the website that will tell you lots more about it. houseplanninghelp.com/291. My call to action is to check out the Hub. This is our membership community that I run alongside House Planning Help, designed specifically for you if you're thinking, you know what, I'd like to build a house and you want to know where to get started. We've got people at all stages of the process, but I think the ones that we help the most are those that come in on day one and stick with us, and they may go quiet for a while and then come back with more questions or need to know what they should be checking out next. So we've basically got a load of digital resources, whether it be the courses you're interested in, the live training from guest experts and fellow self-builders, in-depth video case studies where we go out on site and follow entire builds. And there's a private members-only forum as well. So that's the place where we all interact, and it's a good place to pose questions if you want input from others, because I'm happy to give mine, but if you want input from everyone else, then that's what you've got to do there. So if you want to find out more information about being a Hub member, houseplanninghelp.com/join. Next time, actually, we're chatting to a former Hub member. Why former Hub member? Because he's finished his house. You don't have to stay a member forever. And Mark McCall is that man. He's also what I knew from day one when he joined the Hub. I was quite impressed because he knows a lot about building houses, particularly when it comes to automation. So he runs the website Automated Home, which gets a lot of visitors. And it's an interesting topic, one that I don't know a massive amount about. So what's interesting here is he's trying to do both. He's trying for a high performance home and to get the automation in. But because he's built a house before and he's had all the automation and he doesn't want anything gimmicky. So we're going to find out what is the useful home automation. And not just one guest, but he brings Scott McCall from Epitome Living with him, because Scott's the expert on LuxZone, which is the system that he went for in the end. So lots to talk about next time. Thank you so much for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.